as I was thinking about this gospel story of the passion of Jesus, and in particular where this good thief fits in. Thinking and trying to imagine, who is that good thief? Who really was he? How did he end up in this spot where he was at Jesus' side on another cross, dying beside him? And as I was thinking about that, this story of someone who I met here, it came to mind. And I know I've shared this story with some of you already. It's a sad story, and it's something that I don't know what to do with. Is the story of this past summer. We have this tree on the right side of the house, or on the right side of the church, and some people started living under that tree. Right, some homeless people started living there, and when I first saw it, and maybe many of you as well, thought, just let them stay. Maybe they just need a place to stay for a little bit, and they'll be on their way. But they started bringing more and more things, right? And they were setting up their home here, really, and it wasn't so good. Finally, someone sent me an email and said, Father, just so you know, we're finding needles all around in this area. And for the church, it's not good, but also we've got the school next door and all of the kids, and it's really not good. So as the pastor, it falls on me then to go and to ask them to leave. And when I went, there was this younger lady, younger than I am, not that, like a young woman. And she looked awful. I went over and I felt so bad. I'm sorry, but you can't stay here. I have to ask you to leave. And she was pretty much silent. She didn't really say much of anything. She just kept saying, I'm sorry. And she was packing up her things and leaving. And I felt terrible. And I still feel terrible having had to do that, and just feeling like I don't know any way to help this person, right? I don't know any way to really help in any meaningful way. I wonder, this story of the good thief, who was he? What was his situation? What was his story? We don't know, right? There's some legends, but we can speculate. How did he end up on the cross? Was it a mistake? Was it just a one-off kind of thing, like, oops, I did something, I blew up, or something happened, and that's how I ended up there? We don't know. What we know is that the Romans were brutal, and everyone knew it. And that if you commit a crime, a serious crime, you knew that possible punishment is not just a fine, but death, and even death on a cross. To commit a crime, I wonder, right? You had to be desperate, totally desperate to commit a crime that you knew if you get caught, you're going to be crucified, you're going to be killed in a horrible way. Was this good thief, a man that acted out of desperation? Was he, we don't know, was he a homeless man who was just trying to find his food for the day, who was starving and took something that wasn't his, and he got caught? We don't know. Was he an addict that maybe was stealing money, was pickpocketing or something, right? To have that money so he can get what he wants. We don't know. We don't know. Where's his family? Who was his family? Someone told me this quote that I think there's a truth to it. And it says that poverty isn't the cause of homelessness. Poverty is not the cause of homelessness, but rather the breakdown of family relationships is the cause of homelessness. Because when we have a family, we have a place to go. When you have a family, you have someone to go and to ask for help. Did this thief, did he have family? Did he have people who cared about him? Was he alone? Was he abandoned? We don't know. We don't know what his backstory was, but it's quite likely that it was a sad story that left him in the state where he would take his chances, whether he got caught or didn't, he would take his chances even if it led to a terrible death. Today, what I want to do with you a little bit is just look through the eyes of this thief as he is there with Jesus beside him on a cross, and to see, what do we see? What did he see? And what maybe brought about this change in his heart, where he went from being just the thief to what we would call the good thief, the thief who brings hope and has brought hope to many, many people. The first thing that he sees as he's there beside Jesus is he sees utter craziness. It really is, right? He sees all these people hating on Jesus. They hate him. They're yelling, they're screaming, they're insulting him, they're belittling him. He sees these self-righteous people. He sees egotistical people. He sees all these people just throwing all of this at Jesus, even though he's a man on a cross. He's about to die. Like, at least then give up, right? He's getting what's coming to him if you think he's terrible. But that's not enough. It's not enough that Jesus dies for them. He has to die horribly with insult and all of these things. How can that be? Right? What kind of people are these people? And these aren't just anyone. Like, these are the Roman soldiers, right? These are disciplined men. These are the representatives of the higher powers, of those in authority. These are the priests, the leaders, the priests, right? The priests are out there mocking and taunting him. These are the crowds of people yelling and screaming, everyday parishioners, maybe like yourself. Utter craziness. This thief is looking around, right? And he's got his eyes open and he sees all of this. And I wonder if that didn't strike him and just say, whatever they're doing, whatever they've got, whatever their mindset is, I don't want that. That's really bad. All that leads to is anger and hatred and horrible witness. What an awful scene he sees. What's the next thing maybe that he notices? Maybe next he notices, after all these crazy people, this pure evil, he notices Mary. He notices our Blessed Mother with Mary Magdalene and with John. In the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, if you've ever been there, when you go to the place where Jesus was crucified, right? The church is built over the hill on which Jesus was crucified. And you can actually go to traditionally the spot where the cross stood, and you can reach through the little hole in the floor and you can touch the top of that rock, right? Right beside the place where Jesus is crucified, there's a small altar dedicated to Mary. A small altar to Mary, to Our Lady of Sorrows. And what you see is this picture of Our Lady, this striking picture with a sword piercing her heart. We could imagine, right? If someone was going to be upset, hysterical, questioning God, it would have been Mary. Like, sometimes we have those doubts and those thoughts in our mind, like God, where are you? I'm faithful to you. Why aren't you helping me? There's this evil or bad thing, like, why don't you stop it? What are you doing? Where are you? Do you not care? Sometimes we can think those thoughts, right? Well, if anyone could have thought it, Mary could have thought it, right? As her own son was there on the cross, and she had to watch the whole thing. But yet, what do we see? And the good thief is seeing this, right? He sees not a woman who's hysterical, who's blaspheming against God, who's given up on faith or of hope or trust, but rather he sees a woman who is silent. He sees a woman who in her face, you must be able to see it, is suffering, sharing in the suffering of Jesus, who is there not as a woman faithless, but as a woman of deep faith, who trusts God even to the bitter end, and just how that pierces her heart like that sword. I wonder, for that good thief, another thing along the way to seeing Jesus, if that didn't move him deeply, the witness of Mary. And then finally, his eyes turn even more and up, and he sees Jesus. And what he sees in him must have startled him as well. What he sees is silence. What he sees is a kind of dignity, a kind of determination to do the will of the Father. He sees a faithful Son. He sees Jesus utter these first words from the cross: "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." And wow, right? Like, he's forgiving those people who were not just mean to him, but who like literally nailed him to a cross. He's forgiving those people who the good thief sees are shouting at him and yelling at him and uttering all kinds of craziness at him. Father, forgive them. They do not know what they are doing. And maybe this thief, thinking of his own past, right? Of when you're on the cross, I bet, like time goes really slow. You've got lots of time to think about all kinds of things, to hear everything that's being said, to see everyone's face. Time moves very slow. As he's thinking about this, how Jesus is forgiving them, maybe he begins to think about his own life. Maybe about what happened to him, how he ended up in this horrible spot. Maybe he begins to think about his own regrets. And maybe he begins to think about what he could have done, the good that he could have done, looking at the goodness in Jesus and in Mary. And maybe the thought passed his mind, if Jesus forgave them, maybe he would forgive me. Maybe I could have his mercy. Maybe I could be forgiven too. And finally, maybe thinking about that maybe for a long time, right? Thinking about it over and over, going over it again in his head. Should he say something? Should he call out? What is he going to do? Finally, he looks over to Jesus and he says, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Remember me. And he says this with sorrow in his heart for his sins and with faith that Jesus is the Lord, that he is the Messiah after all that he's seen. And our Lord's response is astonishing. He says, today you will be with me in paradise. This thief, all he asked, Jesus, just remember me, right? Would you please remember me when you go to heaven, when you go to your kingdom? But Jesus goes above and beyond. That's why we call him the good thief. And that's why we call him the thief of hope. Because Jesus doesn't just say, yep, I'll remember you. I'll remember you for a second, or maybe I'll remember you eventually when I get to it. I've got other things to do. But he says, today you will be with me in paradise. Today you will walk into heaven, and I will walk with you. We will go together, and we will walk in the garden of paradise. The reason the good thief is a sign of hope for all of us is because we too can turn to Jesus, and his mercy is bigger than our unfaithfulness. For us, today is the solemnity of Christ the King. There are two kingdoms on display in our gospel, and they are opposed to each other. In the one kingdom, you may be able to convince others that you're someone great. You may be able to put people down, and you may be able to build yourself up greatly. You may be someone that other people have to listen to. That's that kingdom. And that kingdom hated Jesus with everything that they had. Or we can bring our allegiance to the other kingdom, to the King himself, to the King who is so humble that he hardly speaks. He stands out in front of us, so that all the hatred, all the vitriol, that it will hit him first. And in return, he's ready and willing to offer mercy for those who will take it, and a chance at new life. Each of us, we fall under a king, right? Whether your king's pleasure, whether your king is worldly things, whether your king is God. All of us have to choose a king. What better king is there than this king? Than this king who the good thief saw, who he heard, and who he decided to follow there in his last moments on the cross.